A woman eager for a new life moves from a large city to a small town. Thoughts race, her mouth goes dry, anxiety ebbs and flows. The glare of her phone illuminates her face as she picks from the few clinics available. Seeking mental health resources leads to great disappointment. Today, I'll be talking about the inadequate mental health resources in the service desert of Idaho. My research should strengthen your knowledge if you know a thing or two about mental health. For those of you who don't know much, you've run into someone. By now, at this point in your life, you've run into someone with mental health and you'll continue to do so. So I hope you learned something today that can help you be a better member of your community. I've learned more about mental health since I was diagnosed years ago. I've also culminated research from the past 10 years into current and relevant data for today. We'll be approaching this from three topics. First, providers, patients, and the system as a whole. First, let's start with providers. Providers can be found as non-psychiatric or psychiatric. Simply, psychiatric providers have more training with mental health. Non-psychiatric providers do not. In 2016, Best Practices in Mental Health published an article assessing suicide in rural areas, stating, quote, all of Idaho is classified as a mental health profession shortage area, and much of the treatment is provided by primary care providers rather than mental health professionals, end quote. This is similar to if you took your car needing service to an AutoZone. An AutoZone is like a non-psychiatric provider. They can provide you with parts and advice, maybe some medications and advice, but they cannot do the job that a mechanic will do for your car. A psychiatric provider is a lot like a mechanic. And just like how there's nuances with cars, there's nuances with providers as well. You wouldn't, for example, take your BMW needing service to a different mechanic. You would be better off taking it to a BMW mechanic for that car. Next, we'll talk about things from the perspective of the patients, and we'll refer to two patients today. The first is Abby. Abby struggled with suicidal ideation. Now, suicidal ideation is a temporary problem, but it can happen day after day. It can persist for years and even for a person's entire life. And for Abby, this was the case. She moved from a large city to a small town, sought services, went to a clinic, was assessed at the clinic, and they determined she was a high risk. But then they wouldn't give her services. They told her she needed to be on a 2-month wait list first. She waited that period of time. She suffered that entire time. 3 months after she moved to this town, she was finally getting services and had a terrible crisis. She reached out to the clinic. They got back to her and said they would send a crisis team, but the closest crisis team available was an hour and a half away. Imagine if you were in a car accident and in critical condition, and it was going to take an hour and a half for the ambulance to get to you. You might not make it. Our second patient was Bella. She had dissociative identity disorder, commonly known as multiple personality disorder. And to dissuade a misconception about multiple personality disorder, the patient does not have the ability to control which personality he or she is in or at what time. And this was the case for Bella, who moved from a large city to a small town, got involved in a program that had a strict attendance policy, and when she missed class because she was in a different personality at that time, the program completely dismissed her and rejected her from further admission into that program. Having this level of disrespect for her mental condition she had no control over is confusing, to say the least. In a 2025 study by the Journal of Rural Mental Health, an anonymous patient came forward and said the following, quote, in the community, in general, it feels as if there's no shame in mental health. There's no shame in being mentally ill. And I think a lot of people think that there is. And that breaks my heart. If you need help, get help. Last, we'll talk about this from the perspective of the system as a whole. In 2024, Susan Shane reports that approximately one third of the US population lives in an area short on mental health providers. Of that group, more than two-thirds lives in a rural or partially rural places. That works out to 72 million people affected by insufficient mental health resources. Strain for the patients in those areas will fall on family and friends, and while family and friends are a great support, there is no replacement for a professional team. Family can also be a huge detriment if they provide stigma against mental health that prevents that patient from seeking help. Lastly, we find inconsistency with employers who may or may not actually uphold the law and protect employees with mental health issues from discrimination in the workplace. A woman eager for a new life moves from a large city to a small town. Thoughts race. Her mouth goes dry. Anxiety ebbs and flows. The glare of her phone illuminates her face as she seeks from the few clinics available. And after years of struggle, she finally gets a sense of stability, but is always looking for needles in haystacks as long as she lives there. As an anonymous patient once said, if you need help, get help. Thank you.